This is taken from my third novel called The Offering. This first extract is taken from a chapter quite close to the front of the book called The Garden in the Book. My father was a minister of God. He believed this world was a template of another, a stained glass window in which we could see things to come, and we lived accordingly, looking for signs, living by shadows, moment by revelatory moment. In the evenings my father read from a large Bible, and my mother and I listened, hearing the pattern and keeping the time, sitting either side of him, for the Bible was too old to handle and too heavy to hold. A red bookmark forked like a tongue hung from the centre, and the edges shone dimly with greening gold leaf. Mildew had peppered the pages, and time had yellowed and warped each one, so that they resembled the waters of a lake, perpetually rippling away from itself towards the shore. The smell of the Bible I remember most keenly. It was, after the cantankerous creak of the spine, its most evocative aspect. Fusty, acrid, furtive, suggestive of things ravaged, yet fecund with time. I mention this book because its fate seemed to presage our own. I mention it also because in the front of it there was a picture. There were many others throughout in black and white, but there was only one coloured plate, and this was at the beginning. It was the best preserved part of the book because of two grease-proof pages, between which it curtained itself as exclusively as the most holy. When lifted, the veils revealed a page thicker than others, and shiny. The illustration was of a garden, and its hues were jewelled, as if in their newly created state the trees, fruits, and animals were at the apogee of saturation. I'm sorry, I don't actually know how to say fecund and apogee. I guess I should have checked before I did this. That's what comes of being an autodidact. Another word I don't actually know how to say. It was curious in the garden. It wasn't quite heaven, and it wasn't quite earth. Vivid fruits and exotic flowers grew there. Fountains of water showered the foliage, and shapeshifters lurked within it, chameleons, frogs, birds, butterflies. Globes that resembled small planets hung from the boughs of trees, and fruits and flowers glowed alike with an unnatural luminescence, as if illuminated from within. The vegetation itself gave off a greenish phosphorescence that to my young mind resembled the light emanating from heavenly Jerusalem. But in the darker colours lay something irredeemably earthy. There was a harmony in the way the scene arranged itself that suggested a theatre, each view giving onto a fainter one, and that onto a fainter one still, till the whole regressed into a ghostly vista of infinite depth, like theatrical flats on a stage. Yet the creepers and canopies cavorted in lusty confusion, the trees reaching sinuous fingers, frantically, ecstatically, I never could decide, towards the viewer. Where the light did not reach it was shady. It was shadiest of all in the bowers. In the darkest one of them all, you could make out a man and a woman. This was indeed what they were, but to begin with, all you could make out was the paleness of their skin, an absence of colour in a scene that was saturated, so that at first glance they resembled phantoms, a place where the printer had forgotten to lay ink. Holes in the fabric of creation, two human-shaped holes, and beyond them nothing but light. The woman's head was bowed, the man's lifted. Both faces were curiously devoid of emotion, yet they held animal skin mantles around themselves, and huddled together as if they were shivering, or as if they were too aware of the shocking impression their nakedness made. Their faces were blank, yet they were turning away from the viewer, writhing, as if willing him or her to replace the grease-proof page, or perhaps turning away from something else, for behind them, in the centre of the garden, was a clearing, and a tall tree with a snake in its branches, and in front, hanging upon nothing at all, a sword with a gleaming blade. The most disturbing thing of all, whether owing to sympathetic or malevolent intent I could not decide, but made more disturbing by the void of the humans' own faces, was that the trees and flowers, animals and birds, all seemed imbued with an anthropomorphic life force, or as I thought then, were conscious, as trees and flowers and creatures could not be. The trees, an unlikely assortment of deciduous and evergreen, together with various vines, craned their boughs over the humans as if whispering. Their leaves skimmed their hair, tendrils fingered flesh. One creeper had coiled itself around the woman's left arm, in a bracelet, another ensnared her partner's right foot. Birds cocked their heads sideways and watched avidly. One flew up calling. A small horse-like creature pawed at the air. A peacock spread his feathers in a full hand of petrol green fright. A lion laughed, or appeared to. A dog lifted its head and howled, and a chimpanzee whose forehead was creased, as if by all too human anxiety, covered its mouth, as if at some horror too great to be spoken. When I was a child, I thought it was odd that the first thing that the humans did after they sinned was to clothe themselves. After all, God knew what they looked like, and who else could they be hiding from? Why did they put clothes on, I asked. So that they would remember, was the answer. That they had sinned, yes. And then they left the garden and wandered the earth, yes. And why did they do that? I was told, so they wouldn't forget. Blades of Grass, the 13th of June. Dear God, this is the journal of my 14th year. It hasn't really begun yet, but I already know it will be the best year of my life. My task this year is to find you. The blazing arc of the sky tells me this is possible. The hills say it too. The fields swallowed up in the afternoon sun nod their heads. I step off into the arms of the air. I don't know how long I wanted to find you. A long time. Something in the light here says that I might. It's wild. It comes from beyond the rim of the world. And the world is new, and I feel a tugging in the pit of my stomach I can't find a place for. We have come to this place that it seems to me you have made for us. We were obedient, so you remembered us. You remembered your covenant. If you come to me, I will be ready. I will do whatever you ask. You will not have to ask twice. You will not have to remind me. The 22nd of June. Dear God, Elijah and I go into the fields, and it is like I'm seeing things for the first time. I don't know names anymore, I just see shapes and colours. In the mornings I wash in cold water and take my breakfast into the garden. I don't eat indoors anymore. I read the Bible and think about the words till they are like pebbles on my tongue. All around me the garden rustles and sways. It watches. It tries to distract me. As I look at it, green becomes greener. The flowers glow like little lights. Who knew flowers could do that? At night when I take off my clothes, there are seeds in my socks, there are stains on my knees, my nails have soil beneath them, and my hair smells of the sky. The 9th of July. Dear God, I know which shoots in the hedges are good to eat now. There are some that are sweet and some hot like pepper. I see when it's going to rain and what the clouds are called. My skin is changing, my eyes are becoming clearer. It feels like my heart has stopped and started again and is beating with a new rhythm. My lungs have become bigger. I can feel them stretching. My legs and arms are becoming strong. Soon there will be nothing left of who I was. 10th of July. Dear God, we go walking, Elijah and I. often we run. The land opens out beneath us. Wherever we run, there it is, and wherever we don't, there it is not. It is as if we are creating it moment by moment. We stay out till it gets dark and the chill winds come. 11th of July. Dear God, there is so much light here. Sometimes I can't see the road for it. When you made the world, you must have decreed there be a little more light here than anywhere else. The light erases me. Each day I ask the light to erase me a little bit more. When we come in at night, the light is in my face and in Elijah's fur. You can smell it, and I am full, as if I have drunk the light up. I'm full, and yet I'm weightless. My arms and legs are heavy, but I'm as scattered and insubstantial as air, as chaff as the water drops from the pump in the yard. I feel I've been breathed in and out by something much bigger than me. I've asked my mother if you can be blinded by sunlight. I wake to light, and I go to sleep in it. The 24th of July. Dear God, there is a place on the earth where I sit, at the base of the oak tree in the long field, and it feels as if I am at the centre of all things, of all time too, and I am nowhere, but somewhere better than anywhere else. In the long field, Elijah and I lie down, and the grass covers us. The grass is warm and busy. When the wind moves, I feel it is talking to me. I remember the verse about the Holy Spirit moving through the upper room like a stiff rushing breeze, giving the apostles the tongues of the Spirit. If the grass is filled with your spirit, I speak its language. The grass says always, the grass says now. Each blade is the same, but it is different. Each blade has an eye. I pass through the eyes, and I see the world in each one. The grasses talk, and they sing, and they look out. And the grasses cut, God. They cut deeply. 26th of July. Dear God, I will find you, I'm sure. It's just a matter of time. Each day I try to get beneath things. I wear almost nothing. My dungarees sometimes, that's all. My skin is the only thing between us now. I feel the earth with my feet, with my hands and my knees. I press my cheek to the soil. I run my hands over things. The trunk of the big pine, the horseshoe above the barn door, the place where the water comes through the pump, the granite millstone with the red streak of rust. I'm printing myself here, planting myself, building up a record. I'm a blind person learning to read, and a deaf person beginning to hear, and a lame person learning to walk. I am dumb, making words with whatever I find. I am waking. I wake again and again. 28th of July. Dear God, in the long afternoons Elijah and I lie in the garden, and I don't know whether the house is travelling or the clouds. I don't know whether the earth is pulsing or the palms of my hands. I look at the sky so long, I think it might be the whites of my eyes, and the clouds the spaces inside me. I'm gone. I'm nowhere. Nothing at all. A hole in the fabric of things. If I lie still long enough, my body feels part of the ground. I go away and someone else comes. I don't know whether I'm sleeping or awake, and when I get up my head is as light as a dandelion clock, but my stomach is full. I have eaten grass and tasted the soil. 30th of July. Dear God, I see trees now and know I never saw a tree before, just cut out things that were flat and lifeless. Trees are as alive as people are. I feel bad that I ever cut the pine with my knife. Trees are alive, and they are bigger than people think. There is a halo that surrounds them. If you wait long enough, the real trees come out. I showed my mother how I can close my eyes and walk amongst them without bumping into them. Tonight I heard her ask my father if I should have company. The 4th of August. Dear God, There are days here when the wind comes scudding across the fields and sap runs dark from the silver birches and glistens like snakes and accord chimes deep in the earth. I think then that your breath is in the wind and the fields are rooms in your house. And when I sit, you have said, pull up a chair, and when I lie in the grass, you cover me over. There are days here that feel like years. There are whole afternoons that pass by like dreams. There are hours on end when I can think of nothing at all. You can stack these things up. You can press them together. Something will come of it. The 7th of August. Dear God, there is a feeling that comes over me in bed. Something passes through me like a current and I feel myself humming. I knew where we were. The minute we arrived, I remembered. This land is old land. It was promised to us, and now it is ours. The 8th of August. Dear God, if everything in the world was offered to me, I would not exchange it for an hour here or a day. Though there is no time here and no hour but now. The days are a pendulum, swinging back to where they began, repeating endlessly, never done. There is no choosing here, of one thing over another. There is no either or instead of. It is all things always, all things one. And now I'm going to read a bit from near the end of the book, where the girl goes on a journey through the night. This chapter is called The Land's Edge. I don't know how long we ran, but the moon was as bright as the sun, and the air was white like fire all around me. It was like running through water, the moonlight dappling and flowing over everything, stroking my arms and legs, and everything seemed clearer than it had ever been before, the grass standing up white in the light, and the shadows blacker than tar. Elijah's shadow moved beside me, passing over the land like a cloud, and his breath kept me company. Sometimes I couldn't see the road for the light, so I looked straight ahead, but my feet knew where they were taking me, and whenever I began to think, I closed my eyes and concentrated on not falling. The land fell away either side, and the only sounds were my shoes, and Elijah, and me panting. In, out. In, out. As we ran, it seemed to me the land was closing itself behind us, folding up like a book, and wherever we ran, there it was beneath our feet, but wherever we had been, there it was not, and I knew it was vanishing and would not come back. We ran down to the bridge and along the river. The moon was making a pathway there, showing us the way to go, and we followed it. It was the largest, brightest moon I've ever seen. It blinded you if you looked straight at it, like a hole cut out of black card, and beyond it nothing but white light. We came to the Viking settlement and turned left. I could hear Elijah panting and my own breath, and the sounds of my shoes, but after a while the sounds disappeared and there was nothing to show I was running at all, and I didn't feel that I was, only floating. Sometimes I would stop, and when we stopped, Elijah would put his ears up and look back at where we'd come from with his eyes wide and darting. After a while, we came to a hill and sat down in the clearing at the top. The valley was brighter than daylight, and I could see things that were a long way away. Elijah sat panting, his tongue flapping about in his mouth like a little flag, and he looked all around, the hairs above his eyes worrying this way and that. I put my hand on his head, and he swallowed and started panting again, and then I couldn't look at him any more. We sat there gazing out at the land, and it was all right for a while, but there was a tightness in my throat, and soon I had to get up and start running again. We went on through villages where all the houses were sleeping, and past fields where I could hear horses tearing off mouthfuls of grass. And the road and the fields and Elijah and I were more real than daytime and people had ever been, and so was the night. Little weeds and flowers stood up against the sky, as clearly as if they'd been cut out of paper. And there were things too strange and beautiful to speak of, and I knew I was growing more this night than I had done all my life, and was finally touching the stuff behind everything, as I tried to before, and the land was letting me now, because it was leaving, and in the morning would be no more than a husk. Abraham and Isaac travelled for 3 days. Elijah and I ran for 1 night. There was no desert and no mountain. The sea was close, and that was the place God had shown me, because the moon was shining on the water. We stopped twice more, but Elijah wouldn't sit, and stood looking back the way we had come, panting, and when he stopped panting, he whined. I put my hand on him, but he shook free and began whining again. Then I put my head in my arms, and I didn't let myself think about what I had to do, only that soon it would be over. There was a stile beside us, and in the field beyond, gorse bushes. A breeze was blowing over that field, and I knew it came from the sea. We began to run over the field, but my arms were so heavy, and my legs had pains in them, and I had to walk and run and then walk again. There were no more roads then, but I still knew where to go because the moon was pointing, and God was pulling, and whether they were both the same at that moment I couldn't be sure. We came to grassland stretching to the horizon. The path was lined with stunted trees, so I knew we were close to the sea. We followed the path and it led between hedges. Beyond was a field of colours. Even in moonlight you could see them, small strokes of purple and pink, blue, turquoise and green, just like in the paintings by the Dutchman, and Elijah's hackles went up. I will never forget the smell of that field. It was thick and brown and beige and sickly, like the carcasses I saw at the side of the road, but sweet too, as if death itself grew here, and had burst out of the soil before it entered something else. I saw how long our shadows had become. We followed the furrows, and when I looked around at the little dashes of colour, they seemed to be writhing in the light. I don't know what grew in that field, but halfway through it I began to run, and I didn't stop till we got to the top of the hill, though the smell was still with me. This time when I got up, Elijah didn't move. I patted him, but he turned his head away. He was looking at me from the corner of his eyes, the little hairs above his eyebrows twitching this way and that, as if he was embarrassed by our proximity, as if he didn't know me and I had become someone else. Something clutched at me, and I pulled at his collar. "Please," I said, and I began to cry, but he wouldn't move. I got up and began running down the hill, and before I'd got to the bottom he was with me again, and we ran faster. We ate up the ground, straight to the sea, and didn't look back. I'm walking through pine trees. It is bright all around me. Pale mushrooms and ribbons and funk. This last extract comes from a chapter very close to the end of the book, called The Road Through the Pine Trees. I am walking through pine trees. It is bright all around me. Pale mushrooms and ribbons of fungi sprout from tree trunks. The air is sweet and damp, the soil sandy beneath my shoes. Moonlight presses itself into the mossy clefts of roots, crawls into the tight walls of nighttime flowers. And right down in the hollows of the trees, in the roots and the cracks and the crannies, in each cleft and clump, in the coloured mosses and the ribbons of fungi and the bright beetles and bugs, there is light. And each blade and each leaf and each tree is illuminated.